So the human animal, speaking of which, this rolls in perfectly. The human animal has an interesting skill, all right? They set expectations. They set expectations. Now, the Oxford English Dictionary, the Epic Dictionary for Ballers, by the way, defines expectation as a preconceived idea based on what a person has hoped for regarding a future situation. Now, let's go to Tiny T. Let's have Tiny T discuss this. A preconceived idea based on what a person has hoped for regarding a future situation. Now we have our preconceived idea, our stimulus, the thing increasing the chances that we respond. And in response to our stimulus of a preconceived idea, we start hoping R for a future event and outcome O. This logic follows. In effect, we have experiences in the past that we recall, stimuli, to make guesses, responses about what will happen in the future, the outcome. So setting expectations, a lot of the time, setting expectations passes Dr. Kashey's gut check, making them rational. So setting expectations, the logic flows. Does it make sense to set expectations? Yes. Now, do we have evidence supporting the behavior of setting expectations? Yes. We make plans, we follow through on the plans. Things end up happening on account of us setting expectations. So we have evidence to support expectations that conform to reality, which we'll get to in a moment. And that leaves us with the utility portion. Does setting expectations help us now and help us later? Yeah, it helps us now because we can get our stuff together. And if we get our stuff together, then we can start putting things in motion to make those plans, make those expectations a reality. Now, this brings us to one of the other human animals' interesting skills. They entitle themselves. They entitle themselves. So, ye olde Oxford Dictionary paraphrases entitled, at least in the North American vernacular, as a self-important belief of inherent deservingness. So, entitlement in this context fails the gut check. Does entitling ourselves make sense? Actually, in a lot of instances, it does. We have, I think it makes sense to say in a lot of situations, I deserve this. Now, does evidence support you deserving things? Really? Does it make sense for the universe to bend to your will just because you've come to the conclusion that you want something? No. And does this sort of entitlement really help us now and later? I argue that it ends up causing more problems than it solves when we entitle ourselves to things. Anything really. So let us combine these two behaviors. Let us combine these two behaviors of expectation and entitlement. What happens if we entitle ourselves to our expectations? We'll combine the definitions to lubricate our critical thinking here. A self-important deservingness of what we hope for in the future. That looks a lot like making demands. That looks a lot like making demands. In other words, combining these behaviors of expecting things, which makes sense, and entitling ourselves to those expectations, which I think distorts reality a bit, it distorts our expectations into demands. So let's go back to deservingness. What happens if we determine that we deserve something? Well, it should happen in a specific way. We must have it. Indeed. We need it, or else what? And that kind of opens up the can of worms for today's discussion, that or else. Because we set expectations, and then we often jump to the conclusions that we deserve the outcome, meeting or exceeding that expectation we set. We impose all sorts of demands on ourselves, others, the universe, etc. So sometimes our demandingness comes on accident, right? Because of things that happened in our past, we walk around harboring some BS that entitles us to our demands of the future. Sometimes we demand things on purpose, where we straight up tell ourselves and others that we should, must, have to, need things, results, and so forth. And what happens if we get outcomes that deviate from our demands of the situation? Well, that brings us to sometimes an explicit and often implied or else. I must eat and exercise in perfect amounts on a perfect schedule, or else. Wow, this is just too hard. It should happen faster, or else. I need to lose this weight, or else. See how this or else kind of gets implied with that sort of strong, rigid language? Well, or else what? Well, or else we use our demandingness as permission to disturb our emotions and to aggravate the situation. Now, have you ever missed a workout and then took time off because you missed a workout? Like you missed going and then you took the next week off. Have you ever weighed more than you wanted to weigh, beat yourself up, and then that self-downing sapped your motivation to do something about it. I think a lot of us have had experiences where we get an outcome we have a problem with, we beat ourselves up, and then we kind of depress ourselves into making it more difficult to make it better. Have you ever had somebody treat you in a rude way and your mood tanked and distracted you for the rest of the day? Well, because we demand people must treat us the way we want to get treated, or else we give ourselves permission to act like the Incredible Sulk. Yeah, we turn into the Incredible Sulk. We give ourselves permission to start acting poopy. And these represent decent examples of demandingness at work. So I implore you to take your thumbs out of your holsters, get them ready. I have a long history of encountering a situation, making demands of myself, and then having those demands backfire. I upset myself over it and then make the situation worse when I upset myself. Has anyone else had a situation where they made demands of themselves and when reality deviated from their demands, their mood tanked?
Yeah, okay.
If we notice we feel stressed, worked up, upset, and so forth, then chances are we've started masturbating. Things must go this way. They have to work out for us. We really need this. This must work, right? We start masturbating because things must go my way, how I demand they go, or else I'll use this hassle as permission to make myself stressed and disturb myself over. We'll go over this a ton of times from now and into eternity to dramatize a little bit. I consider it that important in terms of really how we end up upsetting ourselves and creating problems. We got enough problems in our lives already. We upset ourselves and make them worse. So how do we really know this happens though? Okay, well, let's think about a time we felt stressed out, had disturbed emotions, and so forth. This means our expectations amounted to a little bit more than mere expectations. It means we distorted our expectations or preferences, if you'd like, into demands. Demands have this sort of rigid, all or nothing, black and white absoluteness about them. Does anyone have a guess as to where that rigid, all or nothing, black and white absoluteness comes from? Just guess. Where do you think that rigid, all or nothing, black and white absoluteness comes from? So I think it stands to reason that this rigid, all or nothing, black and white absoluteness comes from rigid, absolute, black and white, all or nothing ways we speak. We start speaking in this way. And a lot of people like to talk about, well, change your thinking. Well, how do we think? We talk to ourselves. That's what that means. And we talk to ourselves the way we talk to other people. We use this in the context of we use the same language. We use the same words, okay? And so when we act rigid, absolute, black and white, and all or nothing ways, we tend to find those actions rubbing shoulders with rigid, absolute, black and white, all or nothing language. And if we use that sort of language with other people, we also use that sort of language with ourselves. We think that way. So when we talk to ourselves, I just consider that thinking, okay? I consider them the same thing. So in the way we talk to ourselves and in the ways we talk to others. So by speaking to ourselves and others in all or nothing, black and white, perfect or trash sort of language, that acts as a pretty strong stimulus. That sort of extreme all or nothing rigid language. And we imply an or else in there. That or else we use as permission to disturb our emotions, often aggravating our situation as a result. I must have a beach body for summer, or else. With how hard I work, the scale really should reflect it. We really need to make it easier way to do this, or else. If you get annoyed at this good, you'll catch yourself doing it. We use this or else as permission to behave in ways that sabotage our progress, to act out, to binge on snacks and foods, to lash out at other people and so forth, which guess what? Creates an aversive outcome, a fancy word for something we hate, like weight gain, for instance. It acts as its own frustrating stimulus now. That, shall we say, falls short of our demands if we must lose weight, right? And then we use that as permission to upset ourselves all over again, sending us down a spiral into crazy town with far more outcomes we experience as miserable. So now this reminds me of Thomas. After 10.25 hours of work punching numbers in a spreadsheet at work, he had a job as a bookkeeper for a massive company. And I say, yes, 10.25, because he had a weird thing about numbers in other places too besides work. Okay. I think if you asked him about his favorite word, he would say integer or something like that. Okay. Just one of those 10 key people or 9 key, however many keys. Okay. Jeez. So Thomas, after he left work, went to go pick up his little boy, Adam. I already get tingles thinking about this. 6 years old. Adam, 6 years old, does 6-year-old stuff, like make noises with his face a lot. He makes makes a lot of noises with his face. Now, this particular instance, 6-year-old Adam learned that he could get a rise out of people by copying what they say. Now, he had this plan down to a science. He would stay quiet until dad asked him something, and instead of answering, he would just repeat it. Now, after Thomas's 10.25 hours of punching numbers, he already felt, let us say, vulnerable to this sort of shenanigans. And he tells me the story, right? He tells Dr. Kashey he started having all sorts of interesting thoughts. Now, this thinking he described to me happened in a damn near textbook way. Funny, it often does. Making a great example that we can talk about right now. He started demanding, as we do. Back to Tiny T. He started demanding, as we do. Man, he really should have picked another day to do this. Adam has to stop. He really needs to shut up. Emphasis my own, obviously, okay? Lots of or else's in here, right? Or else what? Or else we use this stimulus, in this case, annoying Adam, as permission to disturb ourselves with other distortions. And so he did. Our boy Thomas went from demanding to dramatizing. Why does he always pick the worst days to be so terrible? Always the worst. Terrible. Jeez, right? Easy, it flies right out, right? Then he moved to downing. Am I such an awful father for him to treat me like this? So he downs himself and the kid, okay? He moves to despairing. This is too much to deal with. I can't take it anymore. Okay. In his despair, he started scowling, looking mad, started grumbling a bit. This little kid just acting like little kids do, right? He started grumbling, acting exasperated. He worked himself up, thinking these things in circles, right? Leveraging his anger as permission to act competitive. He turned competitive. I know what I'll do. I'll beat him at his own game, says the 36-year-old man to the 6-year-old boy, because we do those things. Okay. Yeah. He knew that if he used a bad word, that his 6-year-old Adam had enough prudence to cut himself off rather than copy the bad word. Aha! Dad wins, right? So Thomas said, what in the effing hell is your problem? He says to copycat Adam. Actually, Adam simulated him. He responds by saying, what the effing hell is your problem? I already worked myself up over this, right? So the 6-year-old's eyes got as big as the Oreos that mom packed in his lunchbox. And he took a deep breath, held it, and started choking up. What happened? The kid did indeed have enough prudence to cut himself off. And what happened? He started crying, and Thomas created another beautiful stimulus to deal with now. And with striking immediacy, our man Thomas, went right back to demanding. Oh, damn it, I really should have said something else. I must have really struck a nerve. I need to figure out a way to fix this. All this coming right from him, right? We go right back to demanding again. And with the same level of immediacy from the demandingness, right, Thomas realized that the situation rather deviated from his demands. Will any of that happen right now? No, it already happened. He started making demands about something that already happened, which kind of screws him in terms of doing something about it, right? He moves right down to dramatizing again. I never handled these situations well, ever. This is a disaster. Dramatizing. I thought he was a but it turns out I'm just a father. What kind of monster does this? Starts downing himself. Tracy, his wife, will crucify me for this. I'm too stressed now. I give up. Turns out we can really make a mess of things in an 8-minute commute. Remember, Thomas has a strange thing with numbers, so that 8 really sticks out in my head. It takes him 8 minutes. It turns out we can really make a mess of things in 8 minutes. Indeed, the outcome of the situation resulted in more tears from his wife, Tracy, who had her own choice things to say to Thomas, acting as its own stimulus that he used to deal with again. So Thomas, in his outcome, in his response to that, he decided to curl up in the basement with a 6-pack and a sleeve of his 6-year-old's lunchbox Oreos, okay? He got too beat up. He beat himself up and got too beat up. Felt like it came from all angles, so he just hid in a corner with beer and cookies. Sounds pretty good sometimes. And we can all guess the outcome of that, okay? It did real good for his fitness, his composition, his mental health, his family health, and all the other things, right? Really make a good difference for him. So reaction 1 from most of us in situations like this, yikes. Just this whole ordeal, yikes. And then reaction 2, I think for most of us goes, yeah, I've done stuff like that before. Yeah, been there. And so if we keep these things in mind, how much does Googling, what is the best diet to lose weight? How does that help us? How does the best diet to lose weight help you in situations like this? Okay, it looks like 38.5 grams of jasmine rice will save the day here, boys. Okay? It does nothing. So can you see how a question like that and those like it, like, what is the best workout? How do I diet perfectly? All these other things things, they actually distract. They take us miles away from the reality of making progress. Indeed, questions like, what is the best diet? It starts us out in dramatizing. It starts us out and sets us up to demand things. The best diet literally sets us up to make demands of ourselves, to eat perfect on the best diet, etc., okay? And it leads to more situations like this. So by entitling ourselves to our expectations, which we now know essentially means demanding, real life laughs at us. Real life laughs at our demands. And when real life laughs at us, that sucks, okay? And we upset ourselves over it. And then we leverage that upsetness as permission to do dumb stuff. And the dumb stuff we do makes the situation worse, creating more stressors for us to deal with. And that makes it easier for us to act even more demanding. We just keep working ourselves up over and over until we get a case of the I can't stand it-itis and we give up. We must perform exactly as we planned, or else the results have to make sense for us, or else I need to eat perfectly, or else I'll upset myself and eat like a Goomba instead. I must be skinny and fit, or else. Have you guys gotten annoyed by this yet? Good. You'll start catching yourself doing it all the time. Should, must, need. Do you really need that? Should it happen? Does it really make sense for the universe to bend to your will? Is it really terrible? What happened to the tidal wave that killed 10,000 people? How does that compare to your terrible situation with the server that forgot to refill your drink, right? They had terrible service. What the hell, man? Get over yourself. You're doing a drama, okay? When we do a drama, it makes it easy to upset ourselves about things. So again, masturbation leads to aggravation. So let's get back to Thomas's situation now. Rein myself in here with my own drama. So it turns out he and his wife, Tracy, Thomas and Tracy, upset themselves way more than the 6-year-old did, because 2 days later, that little started doing the same thing. The same situation occurred, and Adam went back to his copycat game again. Now, with one good thing that happened in between those 2 days, Thomas and I had a chat, and after giving him a bunch of crap for acting competitive with a 6-year-old, we came up with a plan for the next time it would happen again, because chances are his 6-year-old son would do something again he found annoying. So instead of flipping out and drinking beer and eating cookies when his 6-year-old did 6-year-old things, how do we take a rational approach to deal with any person? Because 36-year-olds can act irritating too. It just so happens that 6-year-old did it. And so these things apply in any sort of situation where you interact with other humans, right? With the same stimulus and a different rational response, he would have a reasonable outcome. So as soon as Thomas found himself demanding and distorting, Thomas caught himself doing it. And then he counted it as a demand or a distortion or a drama or whatever. He caught himself thinking this way, and then he counted it as something. He took an accounting, and then he converted it into his signal to put our plan into action. And so we actually took his annoyance as a way to stimulate another response, a response that we had discussed and practiced ahead of time. Hint, hint. So it turns out his little boy, Adam, loves the Lego movies. Loves the Lego movies, and frankly, so does Thomas, but keep that a secret, okay? I like the Lego movies too. Watched a couple of them. I find them fun. So guess what? They both know the lyrics to the song in the movies. And so when his son started doing son stuff, 6-year-old stuff, he turned on the Lego movie soundtrack. Now, this hits multiple birds with one stone, because one, it gave Thomas a rational thing to do in a situation where he had a history of distorting it and disturbing himself and making the situation worse, okay? Two, it still allowed Adam to play his 6-year-old to play the copycat game. And so if dad sings the lyrics to Everything is Awesome, then his son starts singing Everything is Awesome. All right. And then three, they both had something they can do and enjoy together, which I consider a plus. Consider that a plus, okay? Versus something that we demand of ourselves, right? Sometimes we just want to make it through the situation and keep ourselves from making it worse. If we end up having a grand old time in the process, great, okay? We care more about keeping ourselves from making it worse as priority one. It just so happens when you deal with a 6-year-old, you have a little more play in that regard. So life creates enough hassles for us already, all right? It really does. Too many for us rather, to make sense of making even more hassles for ourselves. Putting demands on top of those hassles, let us say in so many words, increases the chances of us upsetting ourselves and acting like silly gooses. And by acting like a silly goose, I mean neurotic safety-seeking behavior where we try and get away from bad stuff. When we do that, when we act that way, when we have neurotic safety-seeking behavior where we try and get away from bad stuff, it tends to make us more stressed, sicker, fatter, etc. Gross. Okay, I need this. That should happen. We have to get this done, or else I'll blow the situation out of proportion, because things never work. They always fail. Nothing ever goes my way. And when that happens, I'm a turd burglar and doomed to turd burgle for all eternity. So screw it all. I can't stand it anymore. Why bother, right? Just Audit a few of the demands you have on yourself when it comes to food, eating, activity, and other aspects of your life. Look for the shoulds, look for the musts, look for the always, the nevers, the everythings, the nothings, the horribles, the terribles, the awfuls. Or you'll catch a case of the I can't stand it-itis, and you'll do some real silly stuff on account of it, right? I should never make a mistake. Everyone I take care of needs to be happy, or else. Putting demands on other people now, right? It goes all directions. Things either work perfectly or they fail, because when they fail, and they will, the demandingness makes it so we have built-in permission to upset ourselves and throw tantrums. And these tantrums lead to more stress, more misery, more demandingness, and doing more foolish things that make our situation worse. So let's consider it in another way. If your closest friend came up to you and had the exact same demands of themselves as you had of yourself, would you agree with them? The way you talk to yourself. If your best friend came up to you and said, man, I really hate myself. I have to act perfect or else I'm a piece of nothing will ever happen. You'll be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Take a chill pill. I got some back here in my thumb holster, right? Now, would you agree with them? Be like, yeah, you'd be a total piece of shit. Why even bother? Just go downstairs with the handle of bourbon and see me next week. No, you'd probably try and talk some sense back into that person and get them back down to reality, okay? And so having a rational and constructive approach to daily hassles, because the perfect diet, the perfect is the perfect everything, really, if you want to really get a grip, keep it real, it has to do with dealing with the hassles of every day. The perfect plan comes down to dealing with the hassles we experience every day and keeping track of that or else, because that or else ends up screwing with the plan. So dig a little bit and you'll see, because of your outside perspective when talking to your best friend who says these things to you, that maybe they got caught up in throwing their fits and acting silly and beating themselves up over it, making their situation worse. Dr. Kashey bets you would have a better approach for that person to take that treats themselves in that way and tells you about it. And now you can use that power for good on yourself. And now that we have some of the language cueing here, the shooting, the masturbation, the dramatizing, the despairing, the downing, the distorting, the demanding, okay, lots of D's here. You've put yourself light years ahead of other people that demand perfection amid life's chaos. So even if you had the capacity to do things perfectly, and a lot of us may have that capacity in situations to act perfect, we still have to account for life's chaos. Can we control life's chaos? No! So even if we can act perfect, life can still swing around and kick you right in the gonads. And it does, okay? So considering that helps in terms of taking a rational approach. So in this case, when you talk to your friend, take your own damn advice. Doing anything else looks strangely hypocritical. To do on purpose the opposite of what you say, knowing it'll screw you over. That looks silly, okay? That looks silly. Mama Kashey would say, that's like cutting off your nose to spite your face, okay? So when we interact with other people that think this way, we will also catch other people speaking in this way. We will end up counting when they do it. In some respects, we may even want to help convert their language. It'll definitely help us convert our own language and, in effect, turn our wishbones into backbones. Because all that demandingness takes what backbone we have and it turns it into a wishbone. And wishbones have way less bone mineral density. They get soft, okay? So we turn that wishbone into a backbone by auditing our demandingness and responding in ways that helps us now and later. So think about a time when you realize you acted on impulse and ended up causing more stress than it resolved, okay? Maybe it seems like your emotions took the wheel. Has it ever felt like your emotions took the wheel before? Yeah. Sometimes it feels like our emotions take the wheel, okay? And I want to throw gasoline on that and light it on fire, all right? I will, because we disturbed ourselves and then use that disturbance as permission to act silly. So did our emotions take the wheel? No. We disturbed ourselves and used that disturbance as permission to act silly. We still have influence over what we think, do, and say. And we just made it easier for ourselves. We gave ourselves permission to act silly. And we blamed our emotions. Ooh, whatever that means. Do emotions even exist as physical objects? No. So it makes zero sense to put blame on them at all. Off to the side here with behavioral stuff, we still did these actions. We still had command. We still had charge of our bodies and minds and we acted this way. We just gave ourselves permission to do it and used our emotional status as that permission, okay? And so by responding in different ways, we can then moderate the sort of emotional response that we have. So we impose all sorts of demands on ourselves, right? We have expectations, then we take those expectations and entitle ourselves to those expectations. I really want to be skinny, therefore I must get skinny or else, okay, for instance. We put demands on ourselves, others. I really want this person to act nice to me, so they should act nice to me or else. I'll act competitive with them. And that'll really make the situation better. So life is full of enough hassles. I'll say it again. Putting demands on top of those hassles really makes a surefire way to cause some neurotic behavior, safety seeking, getting away from bad stuff that makes us stressed, sicker, fatter, etc. All the stuff we want to avoid anyway. So take some time this week and pay attention to the masturbation machine and give yourself the advice and take the advice that you would give to a friend that beats the crap out of themselves.